Hi, thanks for joining me. This is the third video in the Handling Stress series, and I'm going to start it with a Bible verse because it's going to lead us right into what I want to talk about today. So, Matthew 11:28 through 30. Come to me, all who are labored and heavy laden, which is like a burden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Last week we spoke about peace in the video, in video 2 of the stress series. That's what Matthew's talking about here. When we allow God to take all of our cares from us, it takes the burden off of us. And if we allow it, then we start to realize that we can rest. But again, it takes believing. What a yoke does, I don't know if you guys know what a yoke is because we don't really use oxen anymore. We use big machines. A yoke used to hold 2 oxen, and then the oxen were attached to this yoke. The yoke was attached to reins, of course, and sometimes in between them there was something that would drive the ground, or they'd be dragging something across the ground. The reason that there's a yoke is because then there's 2 oxen. There's not just one pulling this thing. There's 2. It gives it more power. It gives it more strength. If one is weak, the other one helps to pull, and they balance each other out. And that's what equally yoked is a balancing of that. So what Matthew is telling us here in this verse is that if we take on God's yoke, if we take on that, we are giving part of our burden to Him, and He is taking that, and He can make up for us when we are weak. So as you think about oxen, we would be one oxen and God would be the other, and as they pulled, if we couldn't pull and we were getting tired, then God would make that up for us. That's what giving our burdens to God is like. If we allow Him to take those from us, if we at the end of our days when we can't sleep, if we just say, Lord, you know what, I got too much on my mind right now. I'm giving it all to you, and I'm going to go to sleep. God will take care of that. It helps us to rest. It helps us to realize that we are not doing this alone, that He's constantly there, and that we have someone next to us helping us pull that yoke and drag that stuff around. The second verse is in Romans, which is written by Paul. And what he's saying is Romans 8:6. What Paul's speaking of is when we focus on a result, our body and our mind, if we're focusing on our own expectation of what the results of a certain situation will be, then we will never see the actual results unless it looks exactly like that expectation. So when he's talking in this verse, for to set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the spirit is life and peace. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about that. If we're focusing the life part that causes death, and it's not physical death, but what it's causing is the death of our faith, the death of our believing, because we're expecting this certain thing. If we're giving all of our stuff to God and we're relying on Him, we also need to remove the expectation of how we expect that result to look. Just because you really want that car and you're praying for that car doesn't mean that God's going to give you that car, because maybe that car's not good for you. Maybe that car's going to get you into trouble. Maybe that car's broken somewhere and you don't know it, and you're going to get it. It's going to break down in 2 weeks. You're going to be out the money and you won't have a car. God knows better for us than we do. So sometimes, even if you're not a Christian, you remove that expectation of what the result is supposed to look like and just ask for a result and start looking for it and believing that it's going to happen. Then you can start seeing that things are happening, things are moving forward, and all these burdens and all this stress that you're worrying about is being handled. I remember one time, again, raising my kids, single mom, I was broke, totally broke. I had $10. And there was no food in the house. The rent was coming due. The power was coming due. And I had no idea how I was going to handle all that with $10. So I called my Christian mom, who's a big pusher of tithing, which is a whole other thing that we would talk about later. Anyway, she asked me if I tithed, and I said no. I said, I don't have the money to tithe. I said, I only have $10. She goes, tithe that $10. And she said, and then believe God's going to take care of you. And it's the one time, well, one of the only times that my mom was correct. I got in the car, I wrote a check for $10. That's all I had in my checking account. And I went and slid it through the doors of a church because I didn't really belong to a church at that time. And as I drove away, I said, okay, Lord, that's it. I'm totally broke. I have nothing. And I believe that you're going to take care of this for me. I'm going to trust that. I'm just going to go. Well, the next day at school, I asked a friend. I'd heard her talking about food banks. So I'd asked her, where the food banks were. And she said, well, you know what? I just sold my house and I can't move into the new one for a couple weeks. And we're going to be in a hotel. We can't take all the food. So why don't you come by and I'll give you a couple bags of food. I said, okay. So I came by. Oh my gosh. $400 worth of groceries. There were so many groceries I could barely fit them in my car. And they were piling out of my cabinets at my house. Okay, so going from nothing to all of this. Okay, well then I went to call the power company to see if I could make arrangements for my power bill because I wasn't going to be able to pay it. And you're not going to believe this. Someone paid my bill. I don't know who. I don't know how. But I asked them, are you correct? Are you sure this went to my account? And they said, yes, it stays right here. This is a gift. Someone paid your bill for you. I'm going to start crying because I cried back then. I was bawling my eyes out. I couldn't believe it. Well, then there's a knock on my door. Okay, and I open it. This woman's standing outside, and I said, can I help you? And she said, I'm sorry, my sons were walking through the neighborhood when they got off the school bus, and they were opening everyone's mailbox, and they stole a bunch of mail. She said, and I believe these are yours. And she handed them to me. I said, oh, thank you. And she said, I'm so sorry. I said, no, it's okay. It's okay. Thanks for coming by. When I closed the door, I looked down, and I realized that they were 2 child support checks that I was not missing. Those 2 child support checks paid my rent. So, in a matter of 24 hours, after trusting God and believing that I was going to get through that, He overly supplied me with everything that I needed. So, when you remove the expectation of what you think you need, I thought I needed money. I didn't need money. I simply needed to open my eyes and open my heart and believe I was going to get through it. So when you remove the expectation of what you think the resolution to your problem is going to be, you start to see that all of those problems are being resolved. They may not be resolved the way that you think that they're going to be resolved, but they are resolved. And sometimes our miracles are not the ones that we're expecting. For instance, the car, like I said, maybe the miracle is not getting the car because 2 weeks later it's going to break down and you're not going to have a vehicle. Maybe those things happen. So believing that you're going to get through it and that something better is going to happen, and remove the expectation so that something better can happen, is what we need to learn today. And that is what I pray for you this week. In Jesus' name, Lord, I ask that all expectations be removed, Lord, and that people start to allow miracles to happen in their lives. In Jesus' name, Lord, I ask that hearts are opened up and lives are opened up and the light begins to shine and the stress begins to relieve. And that people realize, and the people watching realize, that all of these burdens are not taken on alone. They have someone to help them to ease that yoke and to help carry that burden, and that they learn to let it go. In Jesus' name, Lord. And as always, believe and make it so.